Hello everyone, my name is Mario Martinez and this is Amateur Medicine. So I've seen a lot of students asking for reviews and breakdowns of different EMS textbooks because they're struggling to get through the chapters and are looking for a solid secondary resource. So I decided to go back through my old notes and help break down what you actually need to know. This is going to be part of a playlist that covers a condensed version of the EMT-B curriculum. Just a quick disclaimer, this is not a substitute for your textbook. That should always be your primary resource, but it will help highlight the major concepts you need to focus on. And if you're looking for an NREMT test prep, we do have a full NREMT-B study bundle available at amateurmedicine.com. I'll also be including this PowerPoint as a PDF in that bundle as one of the many resources available. But with that being said, let's get started. So quick disclaimer, this information provided in this video course is intended solely for educational and study purposes to help students and provide better understanding over EMS concepts. It does not replace your agency's standard operating procedures or SOPs or SOGs, medical director guidance, or local state protocols. Always follow the direction of your medical provider and adhere to your agency's approved treatment guidelines. While every effort has been made to ensure accuracy, this content does not cover all possible situations or medications and should not be used as a substitute for professional training, clinical judgment, or protocol review. So what are the different levels in EMS? Well, we have an EMR, an emergency medical responder, an EMT, known as an emergency medical technician, or some people call it an EMT-B or an EMT basic. You have your AEMT, which is your advanced EMT, and your paramedic. Technically, you also have a licensed paramedic if you have an associate's degree, but you really don't need that. I mean, it kind of depends on your agency. I'm a licensed paramedic, so it kind of goes technically above a paramedic and you get like a gold patch. As a special notation, you do not need to be an EMR to be an EMT-B, and you do not need to be an AEMT to be a paramedic. You do, however, need to be an EMT-B and then a paramedic. I haven't heard of any programs that do it differently. Just know, depending on your certain country or state, there may be some variations to this, but again, you don't need to be an EMT-B, an AEMT, a paramedic, or like, let's say even an EMR. You can go straight, from my understanding, to an EMT-B to a paramedic. Some places require you to have like a year of experience. Look around at other places, because honestly, you can go straight from EMT-B to paramedic, and I usually recommend that route. What can an EMR do? An EMR can control bleeding, they can perform CPR, they can use an AED, they can help splint, they can take vitals, and some oxygen administration devices that they have access to are an OPA or an NPA, which we'll go into later, a BVM, suction, and a nasal cannula. They can administer medications via an intramuscular route with auto-injectors. They can use intranasal medication and pre-measured medications. An EMT-B, which we're going over for this text, they can administer medications such as aspirin, nitroglycerin, epinephrine via an epi auto-injector, albuterol, Atrovent, Narcan, also known as naloxone, activated charcoal, and Tylenol, also known as acetaminophen. For airway devices, you have access to a nasal cannula, a nebulizer, a non-rebreather, a BVM, and a CPAP device. Although that's kind of like optional, some places will just teach you a CPAP device and that'll be left off for a paramedic. From my understanding, most places teach CPAP as a paramedic level, so figure out what your state preference is for you. You also need to know how to help a patient through labor and delivery, which is crazy, in emergency situations, as well as how to utilize an AED. You can administer medications via the oral and sublingual route, and other medications previously. Sublingual just means under the tongue, oral means via the mouth. All of these can be expanded depending on your medical director. So we also want to know what an AEMT and a paramedic can do. So an AEMT can administer medications such as normal saline, dextrose, glucagon, nitrous oxide. There may be others depending on your state, but it's a good start. For airway devices, you have access to a supraglottic airway. You need to have knowledge of intubations, but you can't intubate unless your medical director allows you to do so. You can start IVs and IOs, and IVs are just routes via intravenous, and IOs are routes via intraosseous or in the bones. You can start ETCO2 monitoring, where you can measure carbon dioxide levels. You can obtain EKGs or ECGs, however you want to say it, but you can't interpret them. EMTs are generally expected to learn this post-school depending on where you work at, but don't worry if you don't know it now, we'll get to it later. For medications, you can administer medications via subcutaneous and intravenous, as well as the ones that we mentioned previously. All of these can be expanded depending on your medical director. For paramedics, what can they do? So, just like we mentioned with everything else, they can also administer medications like amiodarone, lidocaine, adenosine, atropine, fentanyl, morphine, ketamine, ondansetron, diphenhydramine, midazolam, diazepam, lorazepam, TXA, etomidate, succinylcholine, roconium, and some other medications just depending on your agency and state. Don't worry about memorizing what an AEMT and a paramedic can do as an EMT-B. Just know these are some of the expanded options that you have access to. So don't be intimidated by it. If you don't memorize this, that's okay. For airway devices, they have access to everything we listed previously, plus intubations, cricothyrotomy, and high-flow nasal cannulas. Don't get stuck on high-flow nasal cannulas. Just know them as 1 to 6 liters per minute or 2 to 6 liters per minute. As a paramedic, you need to know other options, though. You need to know how to perform synchronized cardioversion and pacing. You can operate a monitor in cardiac arrest and adjust the voltage as needed. You can administer medications via the transdermal, which just means via the skin, or the rectal route. All of these can be expanded, again, depending on your medical director. So some important terms that generally EMS courses like to ask you are, what is the DOT? The DOT is the U.S. Department of Transportation. There's the NHSTA, which is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act. The EMD, which is the Emergency Medical Dispatch. And the AED, which is an automated external defibrillator. I would just kind of know these terms a little bit. Maybe you can Google them. Maybe you can look at your own textbook and kind of get a more expanded version of it. But just know that's what these terms generally mean. A medical director is a licensed physician who provides oversight, guidance, and authorization for EMS providers within an agency or system. They develop and approve protocols, ensure quality assistance, and are ultimately responsible for patient care practices performed by EMS personnel under their license. Medical control is direction and authorization EMS providers receive from a physician either via real-time or through pre-approved written protocols. There is online, which is also known as direct medical control, which is direct communication with a physician or designated provider via either a radio or a phone for patient care decisions. There's also offline medical control, also known as indirect, which is pre-established protocols, standing orders, and training approved by the medical director that guide EMS care without direct contact. So we have our general protocols that we usually follow. That's like offline medical control. And then if I'm struggling with a patient, if I'm kind of confused on what I should do, I can contact medical control via my radio or the phone. And I can say, hey, I have this patient. It's a 33-year-old male who has an altered mental status. I don't know what to do. These are his vital signs. This is how they're presenting. And then they can guide me accordingly. And so that's online medical control. There's the mobile integrated healthcare. This is a community-based healthcare model that uses EMS resources beyond traditional 911 response to deliver preventative, primary, and follow-up care. Basically, it just means that EMS providers can deliver non-emergency preventative care and follow up often in patients' homes to reduce unnecessary 911 calls and hospital visits. So you can think of things like community paramedicine, or basically we're showing up to people's houses. We're helping them with their daily task, more so with organizing their medications, depending on your local protocols. You can help them with general medical education. And all of that is just to help prevent unnecessary 911 calls. Maybe we kind of reduce it, so somebody who calls frequently, we can kind of help them with their daily life a little bit. And now we've caused it to be, maybe they call every 3 months or 6 months. It also helps with hospital visits in general. There is HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It's a federal law that protects a patient's private health information and limits who can access or share it. Patient information should only be shared with those who are directly involved in care or legally authorized. Never discuss patient details in public or social media, so don't be taking photos of your patient. Technically, that's illegal to do. Don't tell any of your coworkers whenever you get back to the station, hey, this is the call I had, and kind of describe your patient in any way. Sometimes what we'll do for educational standpoints is we may say, hey, I had a patient who had an altered mental status, and I won't give like a specific time, and I'll say, this patient presented with, let's say, diabetic ketoacidosis, and these are some of the things that I did. It was really interesting. That's fine, but once you start to say like the time that you had the patient, if you start to describe the patient, like if I said it was a 33-year-old male on, like, let's say Elm Street, and I had them on Friday at 4 p.m. You may not realize it, but the person that you're talking to may be related to them, or they may know them in some way, and then they can relay it back to the patient. And now you've betrayed your patient because you've broken HIPAA, and you've relayed information that they may be sensitive to them, and then you've technically broken the law. If they want to come after you, they can. Alright, so that's going to be the end of the video. If you did like this, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. And thank you to all of our channel members that help make this possible. If you want to be a channel member and have your name at the end of every new video, there will be a link to it in the video description. There will also be a link to a Discord where we have over 300 plus members in there. It's in the description below, as well as to our test prep website on amateurmedicine.com. Please let me know if you like this style of content, and I'll continue making more. The point is for this to be short and sweet to help you with your studying. Thanks for stopping by again, and good luck to your studying. See ya.